They mocked her, cornered her, and thought she'd stay silent like always, until the new black girl showed them exactly what Detroit taught her. Tameka Rollins knew better than to expect a warm welcome. She sat on the passenger side of her mom's 2008 Chevy Malibu, eyes locked on the red brick building ahead. Jefferson Middle School, in a suburb outside Fort Wayne, Indiana. The school looked clean. Big windows, lots of white faces. It was her first day, but she didn't ask any questions. She just opened the door, adjusted her backpack strap, and stepped out. Her mom, Yolanda, reached over and gave her a firm squeeze on the shoulder. "Text me if anything's off," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes searched her daughter's face the way a surgeon might check for bleeding after stitching someone up. "You hear me, Meek?" "I hear you," Tameka replied. Inside the building, the hallways were too quiet. It wasn't silent, but it had that charged feeling, like everyone was aware of the girl who didn't look like them. She stood out, not because she was loud, not because she wore something wild, but because she was black in a place that rarely had to deal with that. She walked into homeroom and instantly felt every pair of eyes land on her. There was a pause, not long enough to make a scene, but enough for her to notice it. Kids looked at her hair, a tight, pulled-back puff bun, and then her jacket, which was too thin for the Indiana cold, but the best they could afford last month. She didn't stare back. She looked for the empty desk. Back row, third from the left. She walked toward it without breaking pace. No hesitation, no second guessing. "Hey!" someone whispered loud enough for her to hear. "Who invited Wakanda?" The giggle that followed was thin and cowardly. Tameka didn't turn, didn't blink. She'd heard worse in Detroit. But what caught her attention wasn't the joke. It was the girl who said it. Blonde, spotless lip gloss, oversized sweatshirt that probably cost more than Tameka's entire outfit. And she said it like she thought no one would check her. Her name, as she'd later learn, was Amber Klein. Then there was Brett Hanley. He was sitting in the front, feet kicked out, already bored with the class before it started. His hair was buzzed short, and he wore that cocky look like it came free with his Nike hoodie. He didn't say anything, not yet. But the way he looked at her, like he was sizing up a puzzle he didn't want on his table. Tameka didn't flinch. She was here to finish 8th grade, nothing more. She unpacked her notebook, glanced at the whiteboard. Welcome to U.S. history. She'd already done most of this back home. Maybe she'd fly under the radar. Maybe they'd get bored of her. But bored kids with nothing to prove are one thing. Spoiled kids with power to lose? That's something else entirely. During lunch, she sat alone. Not because she wanted to, but because no one asked her to join. Her tray had some kind of mashed potatoes and pizza that didn't even smell like food. She took 2 bites and pushed it aside. She'd eat something when she got home. "Do you do voodoo?" It came from a table 3 spots over. Boy in a varsity hoodie. Not Brett. Not even brave. He was just testing waters. "Bet she got a chicken foot in that bag." Another voice added. She exhaled through her nose. Calm. Controlled. The teacher on lunch duty didn't say a word, just looked the other way. Tameka didn't respond. She stood, walked to the trash, dumped the tray, and headed out. She didn't ask for directions. She just found the library and stayed there until the bell rang. She wasn't looking for trouble. But trouble was definitely looking for her. But there's a limit to how long you can keep your head down when people keep trying to step on it. By the end of her first week, Tameka Rollins had already learned the school's social rules. Rules nobody ever said out loud, but everyone followed. Brett sat at the center table in the cafeteria. That alone told her everything. If he laughed, others laughed. If he mocked someone, no one defended them. Amber flanked him like she owned part of his breath. They weren't dating, at least not officially, but it didn't matter. Together they ruled the hallways without needing to raise their voices. They could wreck someone's day with a look. Tameka walked the edges of every room, always aware of who was behind her. She ate her lunch quickly. She kept her earbuds in, even when nothing was playing. But still, they kept testing her. Not all at once, never in a group. just enough to let her know she didn't belong. Friday morning, someone had taken a marker to her locker. The word was short and messy, like whoever wrote it knew they didn't have much time. Just 3 letters, ugly and sharp, and a smeared handprint next to it. She stared at it for exactly 5 seconds, then pulled a tissue from her backpack and started wiping it down. A teacher passed her. Didn't ask a thing. Just kept walking. She didn't tell the office. She didn't want to sit in some quiet room while an assistant principal promised to investigate and then forget by lunch. Instead, she went to her next class like nothing happened. But the thing is, kids like Brett and Amber, they don't get bored easily. Not when they smell weakness. They want a reaction. And when they don't get one, they escalate. On Monday, Brett knocked her binder off her desk as he walked by. "Oops," he said. No apology. Just that smug smirk. Tameka picked it up in silence. "I'm just saying," Amber said loudly in the locker room one day, brushing her hair as the others pretended not to listen. "Some people smell different. Like greasy or something. It's weird." She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. The girls around her giggled like they'd been waiting to laugh. One of them looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Tameka kept tying her shoes, eyes focused on the laces. That night, she walked home instead of taking the bus. It was cold, but she didn't care. She needed the air. Her mum wouldn't ask questions. She was always too tired after working both shifts at the rehab center. But when she got home and saw her daughter walk through the door without a word, shoes dirty, backpack strap ripped, she stood in the kitchen and waited. "You good?" Yolanda finally asked. "Yeah," Tameka said. "Just a long day." Her mom didn't push. She just walked over and pulled her daughter's head into her chest, held it there without saying anything. That was the only part of the day that didn't feel like a fight. Back at school, the jokes kept coming. Now it was her voice. The way she walked. How she always looked mad. "I bet she writes poetry about gang wars," someone said behind her. The laughter didn't come from cruelty. It came from comfort. They were comfortable mocking her, comfortable believing she'd stay silent. And silence in their minds meant permission. But what they didn't know, what none of them had figured out, was that Tameka was measuring each of them, weighing them, deciding who just followed and who actually started the fire. She had learned back in Detroit that there's a difference between scared people and dangerous people. She knew the ones who threw the first stone were rarely the ones with enough heart to stand in the aftermath. Brett wasn't just a bully. He was proud of it. Amber didn't just gossip. She poisoned people quietly, making others afraid to speak out, and slowly. Tameka realized that silence wouldn't save her. It only gave them space to rehearse their next move. She was cornered behind the auditorium one afternoon. Small moment, no teachers around. Brett stepped too close. She didn't flinch, just looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Back up." He laughed. "You gonna make me?" That was the moment. Right there. When a part of her started waking up again, the part Detroit tried to bury but never quite killed. But before she made any move, she needed to be sure she was ready to finish what she started. Tameka's house sat on a narrow street lined with dented mailboxes and trimmed yards. It wasn't the worst neighborhood, but it was far from the comfort others at Jefferson took for granted. The paint on their porch had peeled off in spots, and the heater inside worked when it felt like it. Still, it was home, and home was supposed to be the safe place. But safe doesn't mean easy. Yolanda Rollins worked from 6:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. most days, split between cleaning shifts at a rehab center and filling in part-time at a senior care home. She left Tameka grocery money in a folded envelope and wrote little reminders on sticky notes. "Don't forget your scarf. Text if you get out early. Take your vitamins." That was her way of checking in. Not with long talks, just small, steady signs that she cared. After school, Tameka would walk in, kick off her shoes, drop her backpack, and start the chores. Wash dishes, warm up leftovers, fold laundry. Then she'd sit at the small dining table with her homework and try to focus. But that week, her mind stayed stuck on what happened behind the auditorium. That moment kept replaying. Brett stepping into her space. his breath too close. His smirk. "You gonna make me?" She didn't move. She just stared at him and repeated herself. "Back, up," and he did, eventually, but not because he was scared. He was amused, like she was some new toy that didn't react the way he expected. That kind of laugh stuck to her skin. At dinner, the microwave beeped. She grabbed her plate and sat down across from the TV, muted on some local news broadcast. The anchors were smiling. The weather was mild, but none of it matched what she was feeling. She thought about calling her cousin Brianna back in Detroit. She'd understand. But it had been months, and they weren't as close as they used to be. Life had pulled them into different corners. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed under the covers, eyes tracing the patterns on her ceiling, thinking back to the last time someone cornered her like that. She was 10. Back then, it wasn't Brett. It was a girl named Jaleesa. Twice her size, always loud, always dragging some drama with her. One day, Jaleesa caught her walking home alone and shoved her hard into a fence, told her to say sorry for something Tameka didn't even do. Tameka had stood there, silent, trying not to cry. That's when Uncle Roe pulled up in his truck. He saw it happen, got out without saying a word, and took Tameka home. Later that night, he handed her a pair of gloves. Nothing fancy, just thin, old sparring gloves from his old boxing days. He told her to put them on. "You don't start fights," he said, tightening the straps. "But if someone brings it to your feet, you finish it. Don't go looking for trouble. But don't run either. That's how you get hunted." She never forgot those words. Not the way he said them, not the look in his eyes when he said it. She was 10. He made her throw punches in the basement. Nothing serious, just drills. How to plant your feet, how to keep your balance, how to breathe through a swing. Back then she didn't think she'd need it. But now she understood. The next morning she woke up early, before the sun. She pulled on her hoodie and walked outside to the tiny patch of backyard behind their duplex. No one was awake, not even the neighbors. She stood there for a moment, then raised her fists, just like he taught her. Left jab, reset, right hook, duck low, 1-2, step back, guard up. Again. She didn't think about school, or Brett, or Amber. She thought about control, about how to keep it, about how to take it back when someone tried to steal it. At school that day, she said even less than usual. Head down, but her mind wasn't quiet anymore. She had a plan now, but every plan has a cost, and she was about to find out just how much it might take to keep her dignity intact. It started with a soda can. Tameka had just closed her locker when she felt something hit her back, not hard, but enough to stop her mid-step. A soft clink, followed by the sound of sneakers scuffing behind her. She turned slowly. Brett was standing a few feet away, arms crossed, his buddies standing just behind him, laughing under their breath. "You dropped something," he said, smirking. The can rolled to a stop at her feet. Tameka looked down, then back at him. She didn't say a word. She just stepped over it and kept walking. But she heard the whisper, sharp and deliberate. "Stuck up." By lunchtime, word had spread that Tameka was too good to talk. Amber added fuel to it, telling anyone who'd listen that Tameka had an attitude problem. The kind of girl who thought she was smarter than everyone, better than everyone. It wasn't true. But truth didn't matter in middle school. Narrative did. That afternoon in science class, the teacher stepped out for a phone call. 2 minutes, maybe 3. Long enough for Amber to slide into the empty seat next to Tameka. "You got a lot of nerve," Amber said quietly, brushing her perfect bangs behind her ear. "Acting like we don't exist. You ain't special, you know." Tameka didn't look at her. She just kept writing. Amber leaned in closer, her voice now tight with something sharper than annoyance. "You think people didn't live here before you? This school was fine without you." Tameka kept her pen moving. "I didn't say it wasn't." "Oh, so now you do talk." Amber laughed under her breath, but there was no humor in it. Just tension, jealousy, and maybe even fear. The kind of fear that looks for company, the kind that needs someone else to shrink first. The teacher walked back in. Amber slid back to her seat, still smirking. Tameka exhaled slowly, willing her hand to stop shaking. After class, in the hallway, Brett brushed past her shoulder deliberately. "Watch it," he muttered. It was all little things. The looks, the muttered comments, the sudden shoves when no one was watching, the low, fake coughs that sounded like slurs, the gum that showed up on her seat, her locker being left slightly open, books dumped inside in a pile, small acts designed to needle her soul. And still, Tameka said nothing, but her silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. She began to notice patterns. When Brett walked alone, when Amber split off to gossip, who followed them blindly, who hesitated. She didn't want to fight. Not really. But she was preparing, just in case. Then, on a Thursday, it finally tipped. Tameka had gym last period. She'd changed quickly, like always, wanting to get in and out. But on her way to the field, someone slammed the locker room door behind her, hard. It echoed. She turned. Too late. Brett stood there, arms outstretched like he was blocking an exit. 2 of his friends were posted near the showers, grinning. Amber wasn't around. This wasn't for show. It was for control. "What's the rush?" he asked. "We just wanted to talk." She didn't answer. He took a step forward. "You got everyone thinking you're tough. But we all know you're just scared." Another step. Her fists stayed at her sides, tight. "You from Detroit, right? You all pretend to be gangsters or something?" She tilted her head slightly. "You finished?" Brett blinked, surprised she'd said anything. It broke his rhythm. "I asked," she said again, this time louder. "You finished?" The kid near the lockers laughed nervously. Brett didn't. Instead, he stepped closer and poked her shoulder. That was it. She didn't swing. Not yet. She slapped his hand away, hard, fast, and stepped back. "Don't touch me," she said, steady. "You don't get to tell me what to—" He reached again. This time, she moved first. A sharp palm strike to his chest pushed him off balance. Not enough to hurt, but enough to make him stumble. He caught himself, looked around, face red. Not from pain, from humiliation. "You want to hit me?" he said, voice rising. "Go ahead, hit me!" But she didn't. Not yet. She just looked at him and said, "I don't swing first, but don't expect me to swing soft either." That silence afterward was thick, uncomfortable. Then a door creaked open. A teacher walking back from the office. Brett backed off like nothing happened. His friends followed. No one said a word. Tameka walked to the field like nothing had happened, but something had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. But if they thought that was the end, they had no idea what was coming. Tameka didn't tell her mom what happened in the locker room. She wanted to. She even stood by her bedroom door for a full minute that night, listening to Yolanda hum low and tired as she scrubbed dishes, before quietly turning back around. Her mother had too much on her plate already. Bills, overtime, cracked heels from being on her feet 14 hours a day. Tameka wasn't about to add this to it. Instead, she sat on her bed with the lights off, headphones in, phone playing a beat she barely heard. Her thoughts were louder. She kept replaying that moment. Brett stepping in, her body reacting without thinking, the pressure in her chest like she'd uncorked something she wasn't sure she could put back. That night, Detroit came back like a memory with teeth. Uncle Roe again. The concrete basement. Her fists bruised from practice, his voice echoing in her head. "Fear's a tool," he once told her. "It's not your enemy unless you hand it over." She remembered the gloves, the heavy ones, with the seams cracked from use. She remembered the way he'd make her run footwork drills until her legs burned. At the time, she thought it was just his way of blowing off steam. Now she saw it different. He was teaching her something nobody else would. How to control herself when other people wanted her out of control. That kind of power? It doesn't come with volume. It comes with knowing you could swing, and choosing when not to. At school the next day, Brett didn't say a word. He walked past her in the hallway and kept his eyes ahead. His shoulders were squared, like he didn't want to give anything away. But she saw the difference. He wasn't grinning. Amber gave her one long, hard stare in math class. Tameka didn't blink. That stare didn't come from confidence. It came from trying to figure out what changed. Because something had changed. That tension in the air wasn't hers anymore. It was theirs. A question started floating around the building. Quiet, but growing. What happened behind the gym? Rumors took shape. Some kids said Tameka hit Brett. Others said he tried to fight her and backed down. A few swore they heard he cried. The truth didn't matter nearly as much as the mystery. And that suited Tameka just fine. She wasn't loud about it. She still walked the halls the same way, earbuds in, head low, books clutched to her chest. But something had shifted behind her eyes. The other students could feel it, even if they didn't understand it. She was no longer marked as a target. She was marked as a question. That Friday, during art class, the teacher asked them to draw a self-portrait without using your face. Tameka didn't hesitate. She took a sheet of paper, grabbed the charcoal pencil, and started sketching. A pair of fists, one open, one clenched. When she turned it in, the teacher stopped and stared at the drawing for a long time. "This yours?" she asked. Tameka nodded once. The teacher didn't say more, but she didn't have to. After school, she stayed behind and sat on the steps outside the gym. She pulled her hoodie tighter. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She just needed the air. The sky was grey and flat. Cold was creeping in, but she didn't care. Then footsteps. She turned her head slightly. It was Mr. Bowen, the janitor. He was an older man, heavy-set, always had a mop or a bucket nearby. Not someone students usually talked to. But he stopped beside her, leaned on the rail and said, "You did good." She looked at him. "What?" "I seen it. What happened back there? I've been here a long time. Kids like him, they don't know what to do when someone says enough." She didn't respond, just looked down at her shoes. He kept going. "They're going to try again. Might not be today. Might not be next week. But when someone like you walks in quiet and walks out stronger, that rattles people." Tameka looked up. "So what do I do?" Mr. Bowen nodded toward the horizon. "You hold your line." But holding your line means standing in a storm, and storms don't blow past without trying to drag you down. It was gym class again. A week after the locker room incident. A week after Brett stopped making jokes. On the surface, everything looked normal. Kids running warm-up laps, Coach Harper yelling from the sideline about hustle and effort, sneakers squeaking on polished wood. But Tameka knew better than to relax. When things go quiet, it's never because the storm passed. It's because it's circling. They were doing relay drills when Coach got pulled into the hallway for a call. The whistle dropped from his hand and hung around his neck like dead weight. He told them to keep running and stepped out. That was the opening. Brett and his two closest shadows, Nolan and Travis, were already near the back wall. Tameka was returning a basketball when Nolan blocked her path, casually bouncing a second ball between his hands. "Hey," he said, grinning. "Want to teach me that karate move you did to Brett?" Travis laughed like it was the best joke he'd heard all year. She didn't respond, just tried to step around him. Brett appeared from behind a support column, chewing gum, face tight with something darker than mockery. He wasn't smiling. "You think that little show last week meant something?" he asked. "You think people are scared of you now?" Tameka stared at him. Quiet, measured. Brett stepped in close, just like before. Close enough that she could count the freckles across his cheek. "I bet you can't swing twice," he whispered. "Bet you used it all up." He reached for her wrist. Wrong move. Her arm snapped out, fast. This time not to slap or push, but to trap. She twisted his wrist just enough to make him yelp and let go. She didn't hold it. She didn't drag it out. Just made him feel what a line in the sand looks like. Brett staggered back, humiliated again. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice level. "I'm not warning you again." His face twisted. "You're dead." He rushed her. She didn't run. She ducked and sidestepped, grabbing his shoulder and using his own momentum to send him skidding into the bleachers. Travis lunged next. Messier, no real aim. She moved quick, knees bent, planted, swinging low into his side with her elbow. He stumbled. Then Nolan froze. He didn't jump in. He just stood there, looking from Brett to Tameka, not sure how things flipped so fast. Coach Harper burst back in a second later, yelling. But it was too late. The other kids stood frozen. No one was laughing. No one was even talking. The silence wasn't awkward. It was shock. They'd never seen Brett lose. Not like this. Tameka stood in the center of the court, chest heaving, sweat on her brow. She didn't look proud. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. Coach barked orders, sent the boys to the office, told Tameka to follow. "You'll explain yourself in there," he snapped. She didn't argue. She just walked. Calm, hands in her hoodie pocket, sneakers thudding softly on the hallway tile. In the main office, she sat on a plastic chair under fluorescent lights. The receptionist looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Principal Moore came out 10 minutes later, face tight. "Inside, now!" Tameka followed him into his office. He shut the door and sat behind his desk. "You want to tell me what that was about?" he asked, leaning forward. She met his eyes. "I told him not to touch me." Moore stared at her, waiting for more. She didn't offer it. "Brett's father is already on his way. Do you know what kind of mess you've just caused?" "I didn't start anything," he sighed. "Look, Tameka, I know it's hard being new, adjusting, but there are better ways to handle this. We have protocols." "I tried those," she cut in. Her tone wasn't rude, but it was final. "They didn't work." He blinked. She could tell he wasn't used to being interrupted. The phone rang. He picked it up, then motioned for her to wait outside. She stepped into the hallway. Brett and his father were already there. His dad was red-faced, pacing, voice rising through the glass as he pointed and shouted. Tameka sat quietly, back straight, breathing even. Whatever came next, she wasn't afraid. But the fight on the court wasn't the one that would change everything. It was the one in that meeting room with the adults who claimed they wanted the truth. By Monday morning, everyone had heard. There weren't photos, there wasn't a video, but the story traveled like wildfire, burning through every hallway, spilling across every grade, morphing with every retelling. Some said Tameka punched all three of them and walked away without a scratch. Others swore Brett cried in front of Coach. One kid in the lunch line said she took down Travis with a roundhouse kick. None of that was true, but the part that mattered, the part no one doubted, was that Tameka Rollins stood her ground and won. The air in school felt different now, heavier, slower. People moved out of her way. Eyes followed her, not with mockery, but with something like respect. Or maybe fear. Either way, the whispers had changed. They weren't laughing anymore. Even Brett, when he walked into homeroom with a busted lip and a silence that clung to him, didn't speak. His usual posse scattered. Travis kept his head down all day. Nolan asked to switch lunch tables. Amber still tried. She passed by Tameka in the hallway, tossed her hair and muttered, "Trash." But it came out flat, like she was performing for an invisible audience that had stopped clapping. Tameka didn't answer. She didn't even slow down. She wasn't interested in revenge. She wasn't there to be anyone's example. She was there to survive, and survive on her terms. At lunch, she sat in her usual spot, alone. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Something had shifted. Kids from other tables kept glancing her way, like they were waiting for her to say something. Start something, lead something. She didn't. She opened her notebook, pulled out a pencil, and started sketching again. The page filled with sharp lines, barbed wire, broken glass. Then, somewhere near the center, she drew a girl. Small, upright, eyes closed but fists ready. She wasn't trying to be poetic. She was just trying to feel solid again. Midway through lunch, Ms. Hightower, her English teacher, approached her table. "Got a minute?" she asked gently. Tameka nodded and followed her to the back corner of the cafeteria where staff usually sat. "I heard what happened," Ms. Hightower said, sitting across from her. "I also know you didn't start it." Tameka said nothing. The teacher leaned in slightly. "I taught Brett's sister 2 years ago. She was quiet too. He made sure of that." Tameka looked up, surprised. She hadn't expected anyone on staff to speak plainly. "I'm not here to pat your back," Ms. Hightower continued. "But I need you to know you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. And you're not alone. That's all." Then she stood up and walked away. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it stayed with Tameka. That afternoon, as she gathered her things for the bus, someone tapped her shoulder. A small, light-skinned girl with long braids and nervous hands. 7th grade, maybe 6th. "I saw what they did to you before," the girl whispered. "By the gym. I wanted to say something, but—" She trailed off, eyes wide. Tameka nodded once. "It's okay. I'm sorry," the girl said. "But thank you." Then she was gone. Those 2 words, "thank you," sat on Tameka's shoulders like unexpected warmth. The ride home was quiet. She didn't even put her earbuds in. That night, Yolanda sat across from her at the kitchen table, holding a letter in one hand. Her face was unreadable. "What's this I hear about a fight?" Tameka took a breath. "They cornered me. Again. I didn't start it." Yolanda was quiet for a long time. She folded the paper slowly, tapped it against the table. "Did you finish it?" Tameka didn't blink. "I didn't swing first, but I didn't let it slide either." Her mother exhaled, then stood up and walked behind her. She rested her hand on Tameka's shoulder. "Good," she said. "Now eat. You're too small to be throwing people around on an empty stomach." Tameka laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. But standing tall once doesn't mean the fight is over. It just means more eyes are watching to see what you'll do next. The letter from the school board came 2 days later. A formal notice requesting Yolanda and Tameka attend a disciplinary review meeting on Thursday evening. The envelope was thick, the kind they only use when people want to sound serious. Inside, words like incident, multiple reports, and student conduct were stamped in bold. Yolanda read it twice, jaw set. Then she folded it carefully and placed it on the kitchen counter. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's go see what they got to say." Thursday arrived cold and grey, the kind of evening that drained colour from everything. Yolanda pulled up to the school in her scrubs, still damp from the laundry room at the senior centre. Her eyes were heavy, but her voice was firm. "You let me talk," she told Tameka. "You've done enough." Inside the building, the lights were too bright. That fake, clean smell of floor polish lingered everywhere. The front office secretary greeted them without looking up, handed Yolanda a clipboard to sign, and pointed toward room 104. 3 chairs were already lined up against the far wall when they entered. Principal Moore sat stiffly at the table, flanked by a school counselor and a district rep whose name neither of them recognized. Brett and his father sat on the opposite end. His dad, tall, flushed, voice already simmering, tapped his pen against the table like a metronome set to annoyance. Tameka sat down beside her mother, her back straight, her eyes forward. Moore cleared his throat. "Let's begin." Brett's father jumped in immediately. "My son was attacked. Let's not dance around it. This girl, this new student, physically assaulted him in front of witnesses." Yolanda didn't move. She just tilted her head. "He cornered my daughter," she said calmly. "Twice. On school grounds, with no staff in sight. So if we're skipping the dancing, let's do it right." The counselor tried to cut in. "Mrs. Rollins, we understand tensions." "No," Yolanda said. "Don't soften it. You've had emails, complaints, other students saw it, heard it. My daughter reported nothing, not because it didn't happen, but because she knew you wouldn't do a damn thing." Moore leaned forward. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," Yolanda said, her voice rising just a hair, "is that my daughter had to defend herself in a school that promised safety, while your golden boy played the victim after getting handled." Brett shifted in his seat, his bruised lip still visible. His father looked ready to explode. "She hit him," he barked. "She warned him," Yolanda replied. He ignored it, so she reminded him. The district rep finally spoke. Her voice was cool, practiced. "This isn't about assigning blame. It's about understanding the full context of what happened. Tameka, would you like to say anything?" Tameka looked at her mother. Yolanda nodded once. She took a breath. "They never said it in front of you," she said, voice quiet but clear. "But they made fun of me. My clothes, my hair, My skin. They called me things, pushed me, wrote on my locker, threw food at me. I stayed quiet. Brett scoffed. No one threw food. You threw a soda can, Tameka said, locking eyes with him. You tried to grab me behind the gym. Moore shifted uncomfortably. There's no footage of that? Exactly. Yolanda snapped. No cameras, no staff. But now that she fought back, suddenly it's worth calling a meeting. The counselor scribbled something on a notepad. The district rep leaned back, silent for a moment. I think, she said slowly, we need to reevaluate how we've been documenting peer conflict and how staff responds to reports of harassment, particularly when students don't feel safe reporting in the first place. Brett's father stood up. So that's it? You're siding with them? No one's taking sides, the rep said. But clearly your son's version isn't the only one with weight. He muttered something under his breath and stormed out. Brett followed, but not before giving Tameka a quick glance, a mix of anger and something closer to caution. The room emptied. Moore looked tired. Yolanda stood, smoothed her scrub top, and shook the district rep's hand. I'm not asking for special treatment, she said. Just fair. You'll have it, the woman replied. I promise. As they walked out, Tameka didn't feel victorious. She felt heard, for the first time. But once people start listening, they also start expecting. And now the quiet girl had everyone watching. The following Monday, Tameka stepped onto campus and noticed something that stopped her for a moment. A space had opened up around her, not out of fear, not exactly, but out of recognition. Teachers nodded, more than a few students glanced her way, then quickly looked down like they'd been caught staring. She didn't walk faster. She didn't walk slower. She just walked like she always had. But now, the hallway didn't feel like a trap. It felt like something she'd earned. Inside, homeroom buzzed low with murmurs. Tameka slipped into her seat near the back. Amber was already there, surrounded by the usuals. But their energy was different. They were quieter, watching her, talking softer. Amber was still trying to maintain control, but the sharp edge in her voice had dulled. Her jokes didn't land like before. Even the girls who used to giggle on cue were starting to break away, drifting toward safer conversations. Brett? He kept his distance. He didn't look scared, but he looked like someone who understood his reach had limits now. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. As Tameka left math class, a folded note slipped from her book when she opened it. No name, no handwriting she recognized. Just 5 words in uneven pencil. I saw. I'm sorry. She stared at it for a moment, not sure what to do with it, not sure if she wanted to. She tucked it into her pocket. Later in the lunchroom, a girl from across the room, tall, brown hair, usually one of Amber's tag-alongs, walked past and mumbled, I liked your drawing in art class. She didn't wait for a reply. Tameka raised her eyebrows but didn't respond. Some things didn't need answers. They just needed space to breathe. By the time gym rolled around, she could feel the tension easing. Not gone, but loosening. Coach Harper pulled her aside during warm-ups. I had to file a report, he said, eyes focused on the clipboard. Just routine. Doesn't go on your record. You're good, she nodded. Thanks. I know I should have seen it earlier, he added, quieter. I'll be watching more closely now. Tameka appreciated the honesty. Adults rarely said that out loud. They usually hid behind policies and paperwork. That evening, back at home, Yolanda was making grilled cheese in the pan, humming again, something she hadn't done in a while. There was a peace in the house that hadn't been there for weeks, the kind you only get after walking through something heavy and coming out whole. As they ate, Yolanda looked up from her plate. They treating you better? Tameka nodded. Yeah, or they're trying to. Good, her mum said, wiping her hands. Don't let them forget who you are. Ever. Tameka wasn't sure they even knew who she was yet, but at least now they were trying to see. That weekend she spent hours at the public library, not because of homework, but because it was quiet and smelled like ink and carpet and old ideas. She checked out a book on graphite drawing and a biography on Gordon Parks. When the librarian stamped the checkout card, She smiled. "Glad to see young folks reading," she said. Tameka smiled back. Just a little. At school the next week, everything continued to shift. The tension was still there, sometimes in glances, sometimes in awkward silences. But it was no longer crushing. It wasn't just her story anymore. Other students began to speak up, about the way certain kids talked, about the jokes they'd laughed at before. One afternoon, in history class, the teacher asked about resilience. A simple vocabulary prompt. "Someone give me an example," she said. "Something from real life." Tameka didn't raise her hand, but a boy across the room, thin, glasses, always quiet, did. He looked over at her and said, "Tameka." The class went still. "She didn't run," he added. She stood up. The teacher looked at her. "You okay with that?" Tameka looked at him, then the teacher, then nodded once. "Yeah, I'm okay with that." But being seen comes with weight, and now she had to decide what to do with it. 2 weeks passed. Nothing major happened. No locker graffiti, no flying soda cans. Brett kept to his corner. Amber still whispered behind people's backs, but her circle had shrunk. Some students started sitting with others they never used to. A few even nodded at Tameka when they saw her. Not out of obligation, just acknowledgement. She hadn't become popular. That was never the goal, but she'd earned something far more valuable: space. She could breathe now. During lunch, she sat at her usual table, but it wasn't empty anymore. The girl who'd slipped the note into her book, her name was Shelby, had started sitting with her. Shelby didn't say much at first, just unpacked her sandwich and asked about art class. Over time, a few more students joined them. No fanfare, just quiet kids, tired of pretending like they didn't see what was happening. Tameka didn't become their leader. She didn't want to be. But she'd made something else possible. She made it okay to speak up. In homeroom one morning, Ms. Hightower brought up a new classroom project. "We're starting a campaign," she said. "It's about voice, telling stories that matter." Tameka glanced up from her desk. "We want students to submit real stories, anonymous if they want, about things they've seen or experienced here. No sugarcoating, just honesty." At first, no one moved, but then a hand went up. Then 2 more. By the end of the week, the submission box overflowed. Ms. Hightower posted one of the first pieces on the bulletin board outside the library. It read, "She told him to back off. He didn't listen, so she made him. No name, no signature, but everyone knew." Tameka stood in front of it for a long time, not out of pride, but because the truth finally had a place to sit. The next day, a 7th grade boy came up to her in the hallway. Short, nervous, shoulders hunched. "Hey, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Did it feel good, fighting back?" Tameka thought about it for a second. "No," she said. "It felt necessary." He nodded like he understood. After that, things kept shifting. Slowly, unevenly. The school didn't magically become safe. There were still looks, still people waiting for her to slip up, but the rules had changed. She'd changed them. Not by yelling, not by trying to be liked, just by drawing a line and holding it. One afternoon, as she was leaving school, Brett walked past her in the parking lot. For the first time, he looked directly at her. No smirk, no attitude, just a long, silent look. And then he kept walking. She didn't follow. She didn't need to. She had nothing left to prove. At home, she hung a new sketch on the wall above her bed. A girl, eyes open, standing tall between 2 storm clouds, fists at her sides, but unclenched. Yolanda noticed it one night while folding laundry. "That one's new." Tameka shrugged. "Yeah, you name it." She thought for a second, then nodded. "Boundaries." Yolanda smiled, just a little. Good name. That weekend they went grocery shopping together, something they hadn't done in weeks. Just normal, quiet, comfortable. On the drive home, Yolanda turned the radio down. She said, "your uncle would have been proud." Tameka didn't say anything right away. She just looked out of the window at the rows of houses sliding past. "I didn't fight to win," she finally said. "I fought so I wouldn't disappear." Her mother reached over and squeezed her hand. Nothing more needed to be said. The next Monday, she walked back into Jefferson Middle School. Same hoodie, same stride, same eyes. But everything was different now. Not because they gave her space, but because she claimed it and held it. Some people fight for attention. Others fight to be left alone. But Tameka Rollins fought for something harder. Respect without apology. If you've ever had to stand your ground when the world tried to shove you into silence, then this story was for you. If it moved you, helped you see yourself or someone you know, share it, subscribe, and keep coming back. Because these stories matter. You matter.